We'll be starting lecture day 2 of the 5-day lecture series just in a minute or so. Welcome to all, and just a reminder, please turn off your cell phones, keep it on mute. Ramesh bhai. Yeah, like yesterday we had at least two phone calls coming in the middle of the session, so please keep it on mute, especially Ramesh bhai. તમારો ફોન મ્યુટ પર છે કે નહીં? હા, ઓકે. રાધે રાધે. Thank you very much. Now, without wasting time, I will request Diji to start the day 2 of the lecture. Thank you.
Gururadhana Dishcha Guru Paramadaivatam Guru Parataram Nasti Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Yo Brahmanam Vidhati Purvam Yo Vai Vedanscha Prahinoti Tasmai Tagvam Hadevamatma Buddhi Prakasham Mumukshurvai Sharanamaham Prapadye. Radhe Radhe Govinda Govinda Radhe Oh Radhe Radhe Govinda Govinda Radhe 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 Govinda Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda Govinda Radhe 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 Govinda Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda Govinda Radhe Govinda Govinda Radhe Oh Radhe Radhe Govinda Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda तुम भी मोही भूलो नहीं पल छिन आधे पल छिन आए हो तुम भी मोही भूलो नहीं पल छिन आधे तो ही भूलूं नहीं ऐसी बना दे ओ मैं भी तो ही भूलूं राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे।
ओ राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे।
ओ गोविंद राधे
गोविंद राधे
गोविंद राधे
गोविंद राधे
गोविंद राधे
गोविंद राधे
ओ गोविंद राधे
गोविंद राधे
गोविंद राधे
गोविंद राधे।
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे।
ओ राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे।
भुक्ति नादे मुक्ति नादे बैकुंठ नादे
मुक्ति नादे मुक्ति नादे वैकुंठ नादे।
भुक्ति नादे मुक्ति नादे बैकुंठ नादे
मुक्ति नादे मुक्ति नादे वैकुंठ नादे।
बैकुंठ नादे
वैकुंठ नादे।
ओ भुक्ति नादे मुक्ति नादे बैकुंठ नादे
मुक्ति नादे मुक्ति नादे वैकुंठ नादे।
काऊ गोपी ते गोपी प्रेम दिला दे ओ काऊ गोपी ते गोपी प्रेम दिला दे गोविंद राधे
गोविंद राधे
ओ गोविंद राधे
गोविंद राधे
गोविंद राधे
गोविंद राधे
गोविंद राधे
गोविंद राधे
सतगुरु सरकार की
Jai.
So continuing on from where we left off yesterday, I have disclosed to you so far that every living being in the universe is a fraction of God. And God is the embodiment of unlimited, everlasting, and ever increasing bliss. Thus, every living being, in fact, is a fraction of bliss. And since every fraction has a natural love, a natural affinity for its entirety, every living being naturally loves and desires happiness or bliss. Moreover, since every living being is eternal and unable to remain inactive for even a fraction of a moment, he has been striving to attain happiness since time immemorial. And yet, curiously enough, in spite of our incessant search for happiness since beginningless time, we have been unable to taste even a drop of it. Inquiring into the reason for this, we went into the Vedas, and they told us that happiness can be attained only upon knowing God. Because God is happiness. Happiness is God. Thereafter, we made an attempt to know God. However, the same Vedas and Shastras then told us that God cannot be known because He is divine and our senses, mind, and intellect are material. Moreover, He is the inspirer and our senses, mind, and intellect are inspired by Him. He is the illuminator, the upholder, and the knower. And our senses, mind, and intellect are illumined, upheld, and known by Him. He is omniscient, all-knowing, whereas the individual soul is ignorant. Furthermore, you were told that God is the abode of numerous mutual contradictions. For instance, He's greater than the greatest, yet smaller than the smallest. And at the same time, He's neither great, neither big, nor small. He's farther than the farthest, yet nearer than the nearest. He is formless, yet assumes many forms. He does not take birth, yet He takes innumerable births. He's known as Nandakumar, the son of Nand, Vasudev, the son of Vasudev, or Dashrathi, the son of Dashrath. He does not have eyes, ears, nose, mouth, etc., and yet He sees, hears, smells, tastes, etc. He has no hands, yet He works. He has no feet, yet He walks. He is so fearful that even fear is afraid of Him, yet He also fears. You were told. He is Atma Ram, that is, self-contented. This means that He sees, hears, smells, tastes, touches, thinks, and knows nothing but Himself. He's absorbed in the self. And yet, the same God, in the form of Shri Krishna, performs the divine dance with the gopis, the milk maidens of Braj. So such a God is beyond the intelligence of even Brahma, Vishnu, and Shankar. And thus, how can we know Him? How can we gain His knowledge? The Vedas declare Him to be inconceivable, unapproachable, and indescribable, ineffable. Finding this out, we become disheartened. However, the same Vedas, kindling a ray of hope in our heart, then tell us which brings us to today's topic. How can we know God? And if we cannot know Him, how will we ever attain our ultimate goal of supreme happiness, unlimited and everlasting happiness? So the Vedas tell us, Vedahametam purukham mahant maditya varanam tamasah parastat. Purushut. Meaning, the Vedas say, well, you know God, whom I just told you about, who is beyond Maya and who is inconceivable, unapproachable, and ineffable. Well, countless people have known and attained Him. You may say, what? But you were just saying that He cannot be known, and you also proved it through a number of logical explanations. How will you now prove that it is possible to know and attain Him? The Vedas say, well, if it were impossible to know Him, then why would we say, Tamev viditvati mrityumeti nanyaha pantha vidyate yanai? Shvetashvataropanishad 3:8. Meaning, by knowing God alone can the individual soul attain freedom from the bondage of Maya. All right. You will say, then tell us how we can know and attain God. The Vedas tell us, Nayamatma pravachanena labhyo na medhaya na bahuna shrutena. Kathopanishad 1:2-23. The Vedas tell us, Nayamatma pravachanena labhyo, etc. He cannot be known by merely listening to discourses, nor can you know Him by reading the scriptures, nor can you know Him by hearing about Him. In fact, if God Himself were to come down on earth, and even if we were to hear Him talk about Himself, we still would not be able to know Him. You may think that surely if God were to stand before us, we would gain His knowledge, we would attain His knowledge immediately. But just think, if this were true, then we would have attained Him by now. Because let alone stand in front of us, He is sitting right inside of us. And still, we are not getting the least benefit. And moreover, we have seen Him not once, twice, but countless times in the course of our innumerable past lives and His countless dissensions. But whenever we saw Him, it was with our material senses, mind, and intellect. And therefore, we saw Him as a material being. Chidanandamay deha tumhari vigat vikar jani adhikari. And since we cannot perceive divinity with material senses, mind, and intellect, we saw Him as an ordinary being. This is why Lord Krishna says in the Gita, Avajananti mamudha manushim tanumashritam paramabhavamajananto mama bhuta maheshwaram. 9:11. He says, Arjun, unaware of my divine nature, the ignorant living beings under the control of Maya mistake me for an ordinary man. And If you think you can know him, if we think that we can also know him through the performance of rites and rituals or other means, then again, we should hear what the Gita has to say. Naham vedairna tapasa na danena na chejjaya shakya evam vidho drashtum drishtvanasi mam yatha. Lord Krishna says, 11:53, the Gita states, no amount of austerity, penance, or rites and rituals can help one attain him. Then how can we know him? Then how can he be attained? The Vedas give us the answer in the second line of the same verse. Yame vaisha vrinute tena labhyastasyaisha atma vivrinute tanugvam swam. Kathopanishad 1:2:23. Meaning that it is only the recipient, it is only the most fortunate soul who is blessed with God's grace, who can see him, know him, attain him, and become eternally gratified. Dhatu prasada deva prasada cha, state the Vedas. Only through his prasad, meaning grace, can you attain him. In the Gita, Arjun is asked by Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna asks Arjun, what is your aim in life? Arjun answers, the attainment of divine bliss and divine abode. Lord Krishna says, Arjun, you're aiming at the right thing, but do you know how you can fulfill your aim? Yes, my Lord. In fact, he said, no, my Lord. Then listen, said Lord Krishna. Tat prasadat param shantim sthanam prapsyasi shashvatam. 1862. Arjun, only through his grace can you attain divine bliss. Who is he, my Lord? Asked Arjun. Arjun, he refers to God. Only through God's grace can you attain divine bliss and divine love. Arjun said, my Lord, Arjun is clever, he said, my Lord, I do not know God. I only know you. Tell me something I can understand. Then Lord Krishna was forced to admit, Mat prasadadavapnoti shashwatam padam avyayam. 1856 Gita. Arjun, you see, I am he through whose grace you will attain your ultimate goal. You will cross all difficulties by my grace. So later on, at the close of the Gita, after Arjun had been blessed with God's grace, with divine grace, Lord Krishna asked him, he said, Arjun, has your ignorance been removed? Have you attained true knowledge? To this Arjun replied, yes, my Lord. Nashto moha smritir labdha tvat prasadan mayachyuta. 1873. My ignorance has been destroyed and I have gained true knowledge, my Lord. Then tell the world how your ignorance was removed, Arjun, said Lord Krishna, so that people may know and follow the same path. Arjun replied, Tvat prasadat. My Lord, this has been possible only through your grace, not through the lecture that Lord Krishna gave in the 18 chapters of the Gita, such a long lecture. We have also heard such lectures innumerable times. I don't mean to discourage you from not coming to these discourses. But Lord Krishna explains that in the Gita it is being explained that we have also heard such lectures innumerable times, but did not derive any benefit from hearing them. And yet there are people in the world who think that they can reach God by merely reading the scriptures. They will often recite from the Gita itself, Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mam Ekam Sharanam Braj, etc. But the saints, the God-realized saints and the scriptures say, what will you get by merely reading the scriptures? You will be worse off than the person who has never opened the scripture. Why? Because such an individual will at least be humble and admit his ignorance. Whereas one who has read the scriptures will naturally be proud of his so-called knowledge. He will not be able to shed tears before God and admit his ignorance. As the scriptures, even in the Western scriptures, it is written, God resisteth the proud, but giveth unto the humble. Submit therefore to God. Humble yourselves under the mighty hands of God, so that he may exalt you in due time. This is why Arjun said, Nashto moha smritir labdha tvat prasadan mayachyut. My Lord, this has been possible only through your grace. You may have read the Ramayana. Tulsidas ji writes, Soi janai jehi dehu janai, janat tumhi hoi jai. Tumari hi kripa tumhi raghunandan, janat bhagat ur chandan. Ram kripa binu sunu khagarai, जानी न जाई राम प्रभुताई. अति हरि कृपा जाहि पर होई, पाऊँ देहि एहि मार्ग सोई. राम कृपा नासहि सब रोगा, जो एहि भांति बने संयोगा. How beautifully Tulsidas ji has expressed the need for God's grace. In other words, it is only the recipient of God's utmost grace, kripa, who even treads the path of realization. The Adhyatma Ramayana also says, Yasya prasadam kurute sachainam drashtumarhati. Only the recipient of God's grace can see God. Even Adi Shankaracharya, the leader of the impersonalists, the leader of the non-dualist Advaitvad, says, Dhanyoham krita krityoham vimuktoham bhavagrahat. Purnoham tvadanugrahat. Nityananda swarupoham purnoham tvadanugrahat. I have become gratified, blessed, and liberated. How? Tvadanugrahat. Only by God's grace. Later, he also writes in his commentary on the Gita, Tadanugraha hetu ke naivacha vijnanena moksha siddhir bhavitu marhati. Meaning, Liberation cannot be attained without God's grace. So all the scriptures recognize that He cannot be known without His grace. Guru Granth Sahib also states, Jaisi nadri kare taisa hoi, binu nadri nanak nahi koi, nadri binu kachu nahi hoi. In other words, nothing is possible without His grace. But what is meant by grace? So you understand that God cannot be known without His grace. But what is the significance of God's grace? What is meant by God's grace? I've already explained, you've already learned and heard that God is divine and our senses, mind, and intellect are material. Therefore, God is beyond our comprehension. He can be known, He will be known only when our senses, mind, and intellect become divine. And this is where divine grace comes in. It is only through God's grace, His divine grace, that our material senses, mind, and intellect will be transformed into divine senses, mind, and intellect. For example, in the Gita, when Arjuna confessed to Lord Krishna at one point that he was unable to see Him as the Supreme Lord of the universe, Lord Krishna blessed Arjuna and revealed he blessed him with divine eyesight and thus revealed to him His magnificent, awe-inspiring form as the Almighty, the all-pervading Lord of the countless universes. In other words, it is through the attainment of God's grace, with the attainment of God's grace, the blessed individual automatically attains divine eyesight, divine ears, divine nose, divine mouth, a divine mind. In other words, divine senses, through which he is able to perceive and experience God through all his senses. This is the significance of God's grace. So the question is, has anyone ever attained God's grace? Yes, countless souls have. A few amongst them are Tulsidas, Surdas, Meera, Nanak, Kabir, Tukaram, etc. But if God treats everyone equally, why does He not shower His grace on everyone alike? Why has He not blessed us with His grace so far? Perhaps there's a condition to be fulfilled. Saints like Meera, Tulsi, etc. must have fulfilled that condition and consequently becoming eligible to receive His grace. Now here a question arises in the mind. If God bestows His grace only upon the fulfillment of a certain condition, then how can He be called the ocean of causeless grace? How can He be called causelessly merciful, merciful without a reason? As the scriptures tell us, Tulsidas ji writes in Vinay Patrika, ऐसो को उधार जग माही बिनु सेवा जो द्रवै दीन पर राम सरस को नाही ऐसो को उधार जग माही. So are we to understand that God is a businessman who is selling His grace at a price? If this is true, if this is so, then He must not have bestowed His grace on us because we did not offer Him a bribe. Makes sense. So if God is selling His grace, if He is a businessman, then why is He called causelessly merciful? On the other hand, if God truly is merciful, without a reason, without a cause, then why has He not blessed us with His grace so far? So these are the questions. In answer to these questions, God says He's all-knowing, He's omniscient, He's all-powerful. He has answers to all our questions. And He says, you are calling me a businessman? You are accusing me of such a crime? Do you know what I demand from you in return for my divine grace? Do you know what I take from you in return for what I give you, such as divine eyes, divine, as I was saying, divine eyesight, divine mind, divine intellect, and above all, unlimited divine bliss? He says, why don't you give me a fair trial and first find out what I give you and what I take from you, what I take from you and what I give you in return? Makes sense? So in Rig Ved, God says, To dasyev sharana amahasya. I will bless you with grace only after you surrender yourself to me. The moment you make a complete self-surrender unto me, I will take you across the ocean of Maya and fill you with supreme happiness, supreme bliss. So if you want to attain divine properties, such as my unlimited divine bliss, my divine abode, then surrender to me. And not only in the Vedas, He tells us the same in the Bhagavad as well. We read in the Bhagavad, Mam ekamev sharana matmanam sarvadehina yahi sarvatma bhavena yayasya hyakuto bhayah. 11th canto, 12th chapter, 15th verse. Lord Krishna says, all living beings must surrender completely unto me. I am the sole shelter for all. Surrendering to me, you will become fearless, etc., etc. Now this time, Arjun asks Lord Krishna in the Gita, he says, my Lord, you have told me that nothing is possible without God's grace, in other words, without your grace. But please tell me then, how can I attain God's grace? How can I attain your grace? Lord Krishna also answers, Tameva sharanam gaccha sarva bhavena bharat. 1862. Arjun, you will attain my grace only when you take refuge in me, only when you take shelter in me. Only then can you attain divine happiness and divine love. This is the one and only condition. Mamevye prapadyante maya metam tarantite. Surrender yourself exclusively to me. 7:14. The Ramayana also says, Man krama vachan chhadi chaturai bhajatahi kripa karat raghurai. As soon as an individual soul abandons all tricks and tactics and surrenders to God, he is blessed with His grace. And what do the great saints, the great world teachers, divine masters have to say on this subject. Jagat Guru Ramanujacharya says, Sarvadharmanscha santyajya sarvakamascha saksharan lokavikranta charanau sharanam te brajam vibho. My Lord, kindly bless me with your grace. I have renounced all desires and even dictates of dharma, righteousness, only to seek the shelter of your lotus feet. Yamunacharya ji expresses a similar sentiment in his scripture Alvandar. He says, Na dharma nishtosmi na chatma vedi na bhakti mas tvaccharanarvinde akinchano nanyagati sharanyam tvatpadamulam sharanam prapadye. My Lord, I am neither virtuous nor intellectual, nor do I possess devotion in my heart. All my hope lies in your lotus feet, which provide shelter for fallen, destitute souls like myself. And Jagat Guru Shri Kripaluji Maharaj, the fifth original Jagat Guru of this era, he has also written extensive literature on the philosophy of divine bliss. In his scripture Bhakti Shatak, which is a collection of 100 devotionally philosophical verses, Shri Maharaj writes, Krishna kripa binu jaye nahi mayati balavan radhe radhe sharanagat par ho kripa yah Gita ko gyan radhe radhe. That is self-explanatory. And Yogi Shri Krishna Prem also writes, in this world of dust and din, whenever anybody has given complete Atmahuti, that is, merging himself in the flame of love divine, there is an explosion, which is grace. No true Atmahuti on earth can ever be in vain. So you understand that God's grace is attained by surrendering to Him. This divine law is accepted by all religions of the world. And even God is bound by His own law. He cannot bestow grace upon an individual who is not surrendered to Him. Although He is, it is said about Him, kartum akartum manyatha kartum samarthaha. He can do whatever He wants, or He can undo whatever He wants. And yet, just as we are bound by material law, in the same way, God is also bound by His divine law. Now the question remains, all right, what is the true meaning of surrender? What is meant by surrendering ourselves to God or self-surrender? Such big words. This will be disclosed only through the help of, mostly with the help of the Gita. So let us go into the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. to find out the meaning, the true meaning of surrender. In the first chapter of the Gita, we read that Arjuna reaches the battlefield of Kurukshetra and sees the army of the Kauravas on the other side. He then declares to Lord Krishna that he will not fight against his own elders, his own family, friends, and kinsmen. He says, Gandivam sransate hastat tvakchaiva paridahiyate. 130. He says, my Lord, my bow, Gandhi, slips from my hands. My body is burning. My mind is reeling with confusion. I am unable to even stand steady. What should I do? After having spoken these words, Arjuna put away his bow and arrow and sat down in the back seat of the chariot. When Lord Krishna asked him to clarify the cause of his confusion, Arjuna answered. He said, all my elders, teachers, and kinsmen are standing before me on the battlefield, prepared to give up their lives. But I do not see how any good can come out of killing my own elders and teachers. I have no desire for a kingdom, wealth, or even life itself. If all those whom I may desire them for, if all those whom I may share this wealth or this kingdom with are killed in the battle, I would be killing my own teachers, elders, my own countrymen, making women widows and children orphans. No, my conscience does not allow me to do this. I would prefer to be killed rather than fight this battle. But in the second chapter of the Gita, the same Arjuna says to Lord Krishna, Karpanya dosho pahata swabhavaha prichhami tvam, etc., etc. Shishyasteham shadhimam tvam prapannam. Karpanya dosho pahata swabhavaha prichhami tvam dharma sammudha chetah yachreyasya nishchitam bruhi tanme shishyasteham shadhimam tvam prapannam. 2:7. He says, my Lord, please guide me, for I am unable to decide due to the bewilderment of my mind. I am unable to decide on the right course of action. Please instruct me, as I am your fully surrendered disciple. Lord Krishna then explained to Arjuna. He said, Arjuna, not fighting the battle will be a sinful action on your part. Arjuna was confused. How can not doing something be considered a bad action? Lord Krishna explained. Arjuna, turning away from the battlefield is a sinful action which will result in the attainment of hell. It is your duty as a kshatriya, as a warrior, to fight this rightful battle. So if you turn away from the battlefield, you are neglecting your duty, as a result of which you will have to suffer. You will have to, as a consequence, you will have to suffer. Arjuna thought it means that refusing to fight is a bad action leading to hell, but please tell me, what the consequence of fighting the battle will be. Lord Krishna again then explained, Hato va prapsyasi swargam jitva va bhokshase mahim. 237. Arjun, if you are slain in the battle, if you are killed in the battle, you will go to Swarg Lok as a result of having performed your duty. If, on the other hand, you win the battle, you come out, you emerge victorious, then you will enjoy the sovereignty of the entire earth, the kingdom of the earth. So it's a win-win situation, since one of the two is bound to happen. Therefore, tasmad uttishta kaunteya yuddhai krita nishchaya. The second line of the same verse. Lord Krishna says, arise, O mighty Arjun, and make a decision, reach a decision upon battle. But Arjun was very clever. He was farsighted. He said, granted that I will surely be favored with either heavenly pleasures or earthly pleasures, but please tell me one more thing. Is there peace and happiness in Swarg Lok? Will I find what I'm looking for in Swarg Lok? Lord Krishna noticed that Arjun is seeking for something much higher than Swarg. And he said, that, I'm trying to think of the verse, it's verse 921. Lord Krishna told Arjun, he said, Arjun, the pleasures of this Swarg Lok are only of those of this earth, but just perfected and heightened. But they're also temporary and limited. True happiness cannot be found even in Swarg Lok. You see, to give you an example, what does this mean? So Lord Krishna said that the pleasures of Swarg Lok are only those of this earth, just heightened and perfected. For example, if in the world if you all of a sudden have a desire to eat a rasgulla, first of all, you will need some funds. You must have some money. And secondly, you will have to make the effort to go to the store and purchase the rasgulla. And thirdly, you have to make the effort to put it in your mouth and to taste it, to taste the sweetness of the rasgulla. But in Swarg Lok, you merely have to make that desire in your mind, and you are already relishing the taste, the pleasure of eating a rasgulla. So they are heightened and perfected, but they're also temporary and limited, because once the fruits of our virtuous actions are finished in Swarg Lok, we can no longer stay in Swarg Lok. We're forced out of there. Where do we go then? Hina taram va vishanti, to lower forms of life on this earth, states the Bhagavad. So true happiness cannot be found even in Swarg Lok. It means then, thought Arjun, that even Swarg Lok should be avoided. And I do not need to ask you about the pleasures of this world, because I've experienced them all during my kingship, and know for a fact that there's not even a trace of happiness on earth. This is why I am in this dilemma to begin with. I'm in this situation. It means that I'm trapped on both sides. If I fight the battle, I'm doing a good deed, I'm performing my duty, as a result of which I face the bondage of either heaven or earth. If I refuse to fight, I am neglecting my duty, as a result of which I face the bondage of hell. So seeing that I face bondage either way, tell me, what should I do that will release me from the bondage of hell, earth, and heaven, the three lokas, Narak, Mrityulok, and Swarglok? Lord Krishna said to Arjun, Arjun, do not perform the action of fighting the battle, and do not perform the action of not fighting the battle, and at the same time, fight the battle. Arjun said, my Lord, what kind of a riddle is this? I'm not good in solving riddles. Lord Krishna said, Arjun, the individual who succeeds in solving this riddle attains liberation from both virtuous and sinful actions. It is only the individual who reaches the stage of complete inactivity who attains supreme happiness. So the next question is, how can we reach this stage of complete inactivity? So Lord Krishna answers, Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam braja aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshishyami ma shuchaha. 1866. So by this time, we've reached the 18th chapter of the Gita, and Lord Krishna says to Arjun, Arjun, abandon all varieties of dharma, righteousness, and come to me alone for shelter. Arjun interrupted. He said, my Lord, I have already acknowledged the fact. I've already accepted you as my one and only refuge, my one and only shelter. And I've already told you I am your fully surrendered disciple. Lord Krishna said, yes, you did say that. But in the very first chapter of the Gita, you were also taking shelter in righteousness. You were afraid of not being able to follow your moral or ritual, your moral rights. You were afraid of rather violating your moral rights, etc. But I'm telling you not to take shelter in worldly duties, but in me alone. Arjun asked, he said, if I renounce my worldly duties, will it not be a sin on my part? Lord Krishna said, do not worry, Arjun. Aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshishyami ma shuchaha. Do not worry, for I shall release you from all bonds, from the fruit, from the actions from all your past sins. So here, what we need to understand is that both good and bad actions are a cause of bondage for the soul. Therefore, both are dangerous. Renunciation of both these actions means surrender. Surrender is another name for doing nothing. So surrender is another name for complete inactivity. And this stage of complete inactivity is the stage we must reach in order to attain God's grace. In other words, the grace of God is based on the fulfillment, based on the condition of complete inactivity. So now, we cannot accuse God of not being merciful. We cannot accuse him of falsely advertising himself as the all-merciful, as the causelessly merciful Father. No, because we now understand that all we have to do in order to attain God's grace is to do nothing. Because surrender means to do nothing, in fact. And doing nothing cannot be called a condition. So you see, God is so clever. Thus, God bestows grace on us when we stop doing everything. This is his divine law. We see the same thing happening in the world. To give you an example, a newborn child does not do anything for itself. The mother assumes its full responsibility. But as the child grows and starts doing things for himself, the mother also starts lessening her responsibility in the same proportion. Then there comes a time when the child is now an adult and he does everything by himself. He feeds himself, bathes himself, goes to college, school on his own, returns home by himself. He comes and goes as he pleases. So the point is that we have to become like a newborn child before God with a pure heart. So in other words, as long as we remain the doers, so the point that is being made here is that as long as we think ourselves to be the doers, God does. He also does. He does the work of noting down our thoughts and ideas and punishing or rewarding us accordingly. In other words, He acts as a judge until then, until we surrender completely to Him. But the moment we start surrendering to Him, He also starts showering His grace on us in direct proportion to our surrender. Our surrender is 50%. He has showered His grace already, 50%. Our surrender is only 20%. He showers 20% of His grace, and so on. And as soon as we surrender completely unto Him, as soon as our surrender is complete, He immediately assumes our full responsibility. Tesham nityabhiyuktanam yogakshemam vahamyaham, 922. Beautiful example of surrender is in the Mahabharata, the great epic Mahabharata. We read about Draupadi, who was the wife of the 5 Pandavas. Once these 5 brothers were tricked into gambling with their 100 cousins. So they gambled, once these 5 brothers gambled with their 100 cousins, the Kauravas, and after having lost everything in the gamble, they put their wife on stake. And in a final bid to win everything back, the Pandavas lost even Draupadi to the Kauravas. And to make things worse, in order to inflict the ultimate humiliation on them, one of the Kauravas, Dushasan, began to disrobe Draupadi in front of all her husbands and all others present in the court. But initially, Draupadi was certain that her 5 brave husbands would protect her honor. But they all hung their heads down in shame because they no longer had the right to offer her protection. They themselves had become slaves. She then looked to her elders for help, such as Dronacharya, Kripacharya, Bhishma Pitama himself, and Dhritarashtra, King Dhritarashtra. But they also had no right to offer her protection. Now Draupadi realized she was all alone. And she thought to herself, the saints speak the truth when they say that everyone in the world is selfish. You see, they were being righteous in not protecting her, because all the elders, the teachers, the Gurujan, they were committed to the throne. They were indebted to the throne. And the Pandavas felt that they could not protect her because they were no longer able to protect her because they themselves had lost themselves in the gamble and had become slaves of the Kauravas. So regardless, Draupadi realized she was all alone. And she started thinking in this way, and gradually she was becoming surrendered, slowly but surely. And yet her surrender was not complete. She decided to protect herself by gripping the edge of her sari between her teeth. But of course, her strength proved no match to that of Dushasan, who is said to have possessed the power, the strength of 60,000 elephants. He tugged once, and the sari was out of Draupadi's teeth. Now she was completely helpless. And yet she remembered that there was still someone who could help her, and that was Shri Krishna, her Sakha. So she cried out to him, Ha Nath Dwarika Vasin. This was a moment of complete surrender. And as soon as she surrendered completely to Lord Krishna appeared before her and protected her by extending the edge of her sari endlessly, Ambara Avatar. So now try as he did, as hard as he tried, Dushasan could not disrobe Draupadi, and he finally gave up out of sheer exhaustion. So this is the story. So we see that as long as Draupadi had faith in others, and as long as she looked to them for protection, she failed to submit completely to Lord Krishna, and consequently she did not receive his grace. She did not receive his protection. But the moment she surrendered completely unto him, the moment she abandoned all hope in others as well as in herself, Shri Krishna came to her rescue immediately and protected her. This is the stage of surrender that we must also reach one day. Whether we reach it in a day, a month, a year, one lifetime, or countless lifetimes. That is entirely up to us. There's a beautiful example given in the Bhagavad. The Bhagavad says, a bird is followed by other birds as long as it holds, as long as it carries a piece of flesh in its beak. Once it lets go of the flesh, of this piece of flesh, it is no longer followed. In exactly the same way, as long as the individual soul hangs on to this material world, in other words, he does not seek shelter in the lotus feet of God, he is subject to grief, fear, anger, greed, pride, hatred, lust, and other diseases of the mind, stemming from the cause of which is, of all these, stemming from family, friends, wealth, property, etc. But as soon as we surrender to him, Chipram bhavati dharmatma shashvat chantim nigacchati. The Gita states, 931, we immediately attain our eternal goal of supreme happiness. So this is the wonderful consequence and the importance of surrendering to God. I will take 5 more minutes of your time. And one other thing we need to understand on the subject of self-surrender, one very important point, and that is, what is it that we have to surrender to God? Regarding surrender, many so-called gurus teach their so-called disciples to repeat a mantra, to repeat certain words every night, and they are told that if they repeat these words every night, they will go to Swarglok, or they will go to the divine abode at the end of their lifetime. Mantras such as Shri Krishna Sharanam Mama, Ram Arpanamastu, Krishna Arpanamastu. Nothing wrong with the mantra, it just means God is my sole refuge. I surrender myself to Shri Ram, I surrender myself to Shri Krishna. But we have to understand that this is only verbal surrender. Just by repeating these mantras does not mean that we are surrendered. It is like that, like the case of a man, to give you an example, who drinks every night but prays for forgiveness every morning. Sham ko khoob si pi, subah ko toba kar li, rind ke rind rahe, haath se jannat na gayi. As the saying goes, he thinks this way, he thinks that he will not have to, not only does he not have to give up his drinking, but he also will not have to incur sin for committing this offense because he's praying every morning for forgiveness. But let us understand once and for all that mere verbal, ceremonial, or physical surrender will not do. As the Western scriptures say, the kingdom of God is not in words. All right, you may say if surrender does not mean physical, verbal, or ceremonial surrender, then what is the true meaning of surrender from a practical point of view? As we discuss, surrender signifies complete inactivity, and we can reach the stage of total inactivity once we stop doing everything. So now, the question is, who does everything? Who is responsible for all our actions? Who is the performer of all our actions? Is it our hands? Is it our feet? Is it our mouth? Is it our body? No. Maneva manushyanam karanam bandhamokshayoh Panchadashi. Chetah khalvasya bandhai muktaye chatmano matam. Bhagavad 3:25-15. And the first verse is in many scriptures, in the Upanishads as well, and it means that the mind alone is the performer of our actions. It is the cause of bondage as well as liberation. Jagadguru Shri Kripaluji Maharaj also writes in Bhakti Shatak, Bandhan aur moksha ka karan man hi bakhan radhe radhe. And this is why Lord Krishna says to Arjuna as well, Mayyeva manadatsva may buddhim niveshaya. 12:8. Arjuna, give me your mind and intellect. This is the true meaning of surrender. It is our mind that we must surrender to God. So now we can go back to the riddle that Lord Krishna had told Arjuna to solve. Do not perform the action of fighting the battle, and do not perform the action of not fighting the battle, and yet fight the battle. So what Lord Krishna tells Arjuna is that he should not perform the action of fighting or abstaining from fighting. In other words, refraining himself, holding himself back from fighting the battle. For if he does, in other words, do not think yourself to be the doer or the non-doer. For if he does think himself to be the doer or non-doer, he will have to suffer the consequence of good or evil action. So why did Lord Krishna tell Arjuna to fight the battle? You see, what Lord Krishna is telling Arjuna is to perform his duty of fighting the battle, but to have his mind attached to God, to him at all times. If the mind is not attached, if he performs his duty only physically, without the attachment of the mind, he will not have to suffer the consequences of his actions. If the mind, which is the performer of our actions, is not attached to the fruits of its actions, then we would not be considered the performers or the doers. And consequently, we would not have to suffer the consequences of either good or evil actions. We would be freed from the bondage of both good or bad actions. So this is the true meaning of surrender. It is our mind that we must surrender to God. And yet the problem is that our mind has been surrendered to this material world since time immemorial. So in order to surrender our mind to God, we must first, or at the same time, detach it from the world in order to attach it to God. And in order to detach the mind from the world, we need to understand the nature of this world. It becomes necessary for us to reflect on the origin and the nature of this material world, the inner world and the outer world. And this will be the topic of discussion tomorrow. Thank you very much for listening patiently with these words. Bole Vrindavan Bihari Lal ki jai. Srimad Satguru Sarkar ki jai. Jai Jai Shri Radhe. Jai Jai Shri Radhe. Jai Jai Shri Radhe.
Thank you very much, Didiji. Once again, it was wonderful to hear from you all the quotations from scriptures and listening to Kripalaji Maharaj's philosophy of divine love. Thank you all for coming, and tomorrow will be the third day of the lecture series. I hope to see you all and let the word spread, and it's wonderful to hear all this philosophy in a compact manner, in a simple language. So please take advantage and let others also take advantage of it. Please take Aarti and Achman and Prasad from Didi, and there will be some dinner Prasad available in the dining hall. Radhe Radhe.